How was Shabbat?
Right.
You were not Neil?
Yes.
Did you see my son?
Yes.
Did you talk to him?
No. No, all the time. I try, but then the line
Has to be the right time. Has to be the right time.
soon.
ברוך אתה ה' אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל נהיה בדברו. So we're going to start learning the rules of brachot and kashrut, but even though I drank in the car, I moved from a different place. It's a halacha of shinui makom. You have to move to a different place. You have to make a new bracha. Bracha has a expiry date, expiry time, situation, conditions. The bracha lasts only if you remain in the same place. So I have a new bracha here that I've entered the room, the building, and
let's say you finish a drink, do you need to make another, you pour another drink?
right. It depends, a lot depends on your mind. As I said, there's physical conditions. If you leave the premises, it's called shinui makom. But a lot depends on what you're thinking in your mind. So what I'm thinking in my mind when I make the shakol is that it's going to cover the whole day, as long as I know that I'm going to drink and then have another cup, another cup, another cup. So each cup I don't have to make a different bracha. I shouldn't really. It's unnecessary. As long as I stay within the premises. If I walk outside, it breaks. It depends. It's more complicated. It depends what bracha. We're talking about shakol now for a drink. As long as I stay on the premises and I have in mind that I'm going to continue drinking, so I don't make another bracha over and over again. Okay, good morning, Pinchas. Shavua Tov. Let's get our laws of Shabbat. We'll get started. We also have this book, this great book of the laws of Shabbat. I'll just show you briefly. We had the laws of Hatsala here that we covered last week. We have nice pictures of carrying in and out. We have yards. We have this all sorts of prohibited types of carrying. You can see here the little pillar of a makom ptor. We said there's a small little area that you're allowed to carry onto the green apple. It's kosher with the little green book. But this is a good tool if you want to avail yourself of this and learn Hilchot Shabbat graphically. Then this is the page about the muktzah. We talked about 5 different types of muktzah. Muktzah machmat isur. It's an object which is designed for using forbidden things. Here's the expensive camera, which is muktzah machmat chesron kis. Lost things that you don't move because they're expensive, but moving it with your foot is allowed. We talked about muktzah the other week, and there's a few more nice examples. Here's the guy using the hammer to break open the coconut. We talked about that, remember? Even though a hammer is usually used for building, so it's a klei shemelachtot leisur. If you're using it for heter, you're allowed to, or if you need the space, if you need to move the saw off of your chair because you want to sit down there, that could be painful. So you're allowed to move that type of muktzah, and that's the end of the book. So yeah.
Good question, Rabbi.
Yeah.
On Shabbat, I got siddur inside my bag. I want to go and take. Is it museh?
Right. So we mentioned it a little bit. We talked about what happens if you have your tefillin in your bag together with your talit. Similar stories if you have a siddur inside a bag. The bag has a computer in it. The bag has a pen in it. Has muktzah in it.
Yes.
So if that's where you keep your pen and that's where you keep your computer, so the whole bag it becomes a basis l'devar ha'asur. Becomes a base. A base. The base is you can't move, just like you can't move the muktzah item, you can't move the base either. So you can't really move that bag. What you can do is if you're not going to move, and we said muktzah is not about touching, it's about moving. So if you're not going to actually move the muktzah item, just pull out the siddur, then you can take the siddur. If you can reach the siddur, and even if by accident something might move a little bit, it's allowed. So you can take out. It's inadvertently moving that muktzah. That's allowed. So you're allowed to, like we said with the talit, you pull out the talit, even though you're going to be moving the tefillin a little bit. Tefillin are not as bad a type of muktzah as a pen or something like that, but many times it happens. You need to get something out In terms of the car, we said it's a little more problematic. Usually you have to open the door of the car and the lights go on. It's another problem. And you're moving it. You're not actually just pulling it out without moving the muktzah. Here you're actually moving.
But you use the key to open, is okay, right?
If you can use a key to open your front door, why not? But nowadays, most keys of car doors are electric, and because if you open one key, then all four doors open up. So it's problematic. You're using electricity, so it's a problem. But there are some doors that are only that door gets opened up. It's not electric; it's mechanical. You're just moving the pin from here to there, the cylinder, whatever it is. Could be allowed. Depends if you have an older type of car, a type of car which doesn't have electronics associated with the key. If you're not moving the car, there's room to be lenient as long as no lights are going to turn on and so forth. Bezrat Hashem. Anyways, this week we're going to finish up the laws of Shabbat. We have perhaps the most important chapter that we should have started with, and that's the second to last chapter, chapter 28, or chapter 27 actually, and that is really my responsibility, because the Torah says that one of the greatest mitzvot in the Torah is to save a life. Saving a life. Pikuach nefesh. Page 235, it's chapter 27. And the reason why I say it's my responsibility, because the halacha says that if someone's life is at danger, and you go to your rabbi and ask, can I drive him to the hospital? Can I give him this medicine? Can I cook up this food, whatever it is he needs? And you come to the rabbi and you ask him, you know who's guilty? Of course, it's the wrong thing to do. But the rabbi is guilty because he didn't teach you, first of all. It should be obvious. It should be the most clear halacha in the mind of all of your students that you violate the Shabbat if you can save a life. You don't even ask the question. You are being... You are considered to be derided. If you ask the question, and the rabbi who gets asked is also derided because you didn't teach your students well enough. They should know that even without asking. Of course, you save a life. Anything that's necessary to save a life, don't ask. Don't even ask. If you ask, it's even worse. It makes you look bad and makes the rabbi look bad.
But you don't ask how to learn.
Right here. This is the class. You learn now. That's why we're learning now. Before you have to ask.
Time you walk 5 minutes to your rabbi and they delay.
Exactly. You're not allowed to delay. Any little delay could cause the person to die. You never know, right? We have today an ambulance that comes as soon as possible. That's the ideal. There's a religious fellow who started an organization called Hatsala. Because he realized that we call the regular ambulance service, sometimes it comes in 10 minutes, sometimes it comes in 5 minutes. But he realized that to save a life, if somebody's having a heart attack, for example, the speed is so critical. So he started a new organization, and now it's being copied all around the world. It's called, anybody know what I'm talking about? They decided we are going to have people, a network of people, and our obligation, our goal is to get there, somebody calls, within 3 minutes.
Helicopter. They do it in Holland.
Sometimes they use a helicopter. It could take you 15 minutes just to get the helicopter up in the air.
No.
Here, 5 minutes? Nice, but that's too long. This organization wants to be there to every call within 3 minutes. How did they do that? You know what the organization called? You know about it, Israel. It's called Hatsala. Hatsala means salvation, saving someone.
Ambulance.
It's a form of ambulance. That's right. It's a private ambulance service. They have motorcycles. They have people on call who are not the highest trained paramedics, but they know their first job is to get there. quick, and they basically undercut the business of what's called MADA, Magen David Adom, which is the Red Cross around the world. So here it's the red Magen David, the Red Crescent in the Islamic countries. Here it's Magen David Adom. The Magen David, the Shield of David, that's the Jewish symbol. But whatever it is, there's a standard ambulance service in Israel, and they do a great job. Amazing people, amazing. One of our teachers is finishing up his training course to be a paramedic in an ambulance. Rabbi Weinstein. He went through a whole course, yeah. And very soon he's going to finish and be legally certified to be an ambulance worker. And it's an amazing service. But on top of that, this private organization called Hatsala realized that with all their good intentions and the good work which MADA does, which the Red Cross does, they don't get there within 3 minutes. And so they can do something better. They can do something even, they can save lives. The quicker, the speed makes such a difference for some things. And so this organization now is really did amazing, saved so many lives because of the speed with which they get there. And of course, now they've been fighting with Magen David Adom. There should be one. They should work together. They shouldn't work against each other. There's lots of politics because it has to do with fundraising. There's lots of politics. But at the end of the day, we have to save lives. It's a tremendous thing. Yeah.
I personally have experience of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it.
Please, what's your experience?
Yeah, and I fall in the stairs. I have a small stairs inside the apartment.
Okay.
And I pressed my button.
You have a button? You have a beeper or something? Or
Yeah.
you wear it around your neck or something?
Yeah.
Always. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who does it call? Called Yad Sarah, no? Or was it?
I don't know.
You don't know, but it calls somebody, yeah.
You call somebody. About less than 10 minutes,
Yeah.
there was somebody in my door.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he opened the door.
Wow.
And they came the motorbike guy.
Yeah.
8 minutes.
Right? Yeah.
And they came in one ambulance.
Yeah.
Then came in another ambulance.
Wow.
They called a doctor, one doctor.
Wow.
They called 2 nurses.
Wow.
They come. I count when I was inside I say, how many people?
Wow.
This is, we are 12.
12 people. Wow.
In 13 minutes.
Amazing. That's
13
great. That's
minutes.
Great. That's great. It's the way it should be, even quicker. But yeah.
Then I was in the hospital. Boom! I come. They put me in there. There was 2 nurses
Wow.
already waiting.
Amazing.
Incredible.
Incredible, huh?
You can imagine. And they know how to do it.
Everything was very organized, very quick, huh? Yeah.
Quick.
Efficient.
I said, what are you doing? I said, I'm dying? No, you're not dying. I was more tired, more
Yeah.
than them.
Yeah.
You can't imagine.
Wow.
This is something you can say, I'm a Jew, I'm an Israeli, I'm the best thing.
Yeah.
Medical system.
Beautiful. Wow. That's a Kiddush Hashem, yeah. Yeah, if everything would work as well as that, that'd be great. Yeah, but that's 100%.
Yeah.
Great.
It's fantastic. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
How they are nice, kind, put it as they know. And I ask you in the hospital, they don't get a penny.
No, they don't get a penny. No. A lot of
penny.
there's a lot of volunteers and these people. That's their job. But
It's because you're insured?
No.
so in Israel, even anybody who is sick gets medical care, and of course, if you don't have coverage, then you have to pay for it. But in terms of emergency medical care, of course, you get, regardless, you're taken to the hospital and whatever you need is, and then you'll get a bill if you don't have insurance. If you have insurance, they'll pay for it. But every citizen in Israel gets free medical care. It's part of the socialist origins of Israel. Israel was created by a lot of socialists, and it's an amazing medical system. But in terms of emergency, you got to, as quick as possible. We have to save lives. Saving lives. Torah is all about life. God is the source of life. And as important as Shabbat is, saving a life overrides Shabbat.
But just now you didn't mention how quick they do that 3 minutes. How they did it.
How do they do that?
Yeah.
Well, they have a network of volunteers. The key is the network of volunteers.
Everywhere.
And everywhere there's a network, and some people have scooters, and some people have cars, and some people have motorbikes, and all different kinds. And having the network is
They
the
guarantee
key.
3 minutes or what?
Yeah,
Yes,
they get
that-
that's their system. And they have, of course, whenever they get a call, everybody who's in the vicinity automatically gets it used to be beepers. They get a WhatsApp message, and whoever, they all jump, and it's a great system to save lives. Yeah, so anything when there's even a chance of a loss of life, you have to violate the Shabbat. You have to override the Shabbat, even if there's a slim chance that this might cause somebody death. We'll violate the Shabbat without asking. Okay, no asking. So it'll look bad on me. All right, if I didn't teach you properly. Okay, let's learn a little bit. Page 235. It's called Pikuach Nefesh, which comes from the word to take care, to supervise. And if you look at the bottom of the footnote number 1 on page 235, Eitan, will you read for us the footnote number 1? It's at the bottom, page 235, the footnote. Saving a life, yeah.
Saving a life overrides all mitzvot, with the exception of the 3 cardinal sins: idolatry, murder, and sexual transgressions. Concerning these 3, the rule is one should be killed and not transgress. Those the punishments that the Torah prescribes for Shabbat desecration is stoning. The most certain punishment in the Torah, and the same punishment specified for idol worship, nevertheless when it comes to life-saving activities for performing Menachem and Shabbat. It is not considered a transgression. In contrast, the 3 cardinal sins are considered transgressions, no matter how dire the situation. This is because of one transgress, one of them is life lose all meaning, and he brings death and destruction to the world.
Okay, there's a little bit of a contradiction here. So he says the solution is, when you have to desecrate the Shabbat to save a life, it's not called desecration. It's not called desecration. Shabbat ceases. There's different ways of understanding it. Hutra or Dechuya, Shabbat still exists or gets pushed to the side, or you just say, no, Shabbat, it just doesn't apply anymore. It's not called desecrating the Shabbat. The Shabbat doesn't apply whenever there's a situation of danger to life. Yes?
Maybe you mentioned that there is a medicine system also, because if you go somewhere, you forgot your injection, right? So you just go call the one phone number. They go here. They
right.
find it.
Right, very nice, yes. There's also, in addition to the government healthcare, there's like I said, the private organizations which supplement, like Hatsala, for ambulance services. Also, there's for medications. You can get most medications for free, but sometimes and there's always, in every city in Israel, there's a pharmacy which is on call. There has to be one pharmacy which is open all night long, even on Shabbat. It's open on Shabbat. So there's always one pharmacy. But let's say you live far away from the pharmacy, you don't know where it is, you don't know, and you don't have your drugs, you need this medicines. So there's what's called chesed organizations. It's there's chesed organizations for a lot of different things. Right, exactly. It's called the gamach. Do you know what gamach is? What does gamach mean? What does it stand for? There's something called gamach. Gemach, that stands for, Gimel is for Gimilut, and the Chet, and I guess the Gimel and the Mem, and then the Chasadim. So Chasadim are acts of loving kindness, right? So acts, Chasadim are kindness. Gemilut is a word which is not used so much in modern Hebrew, but we say it in our prayers all the time. Go and Amidah, right? Gomel Chasadim Tovim. That God, it's a fancy way of saying giving, right? To do kindness. So ligmol is like we say la'asot is to do. The fancy verb for giving acts of kindness is ligmol, gimel mem lamed, instead of asa or natan, to give. Right? So it's a sort of a combination of to give and to do is ligmol, gimel mem lamed. So gemilut chasadim is doing acts of kindness. So there's organizations which are designed, gemachim. They're called, basically, they're chesed organizations. They use the name gemach for organizations of chesed, of very different kinds. A chesed organization, it's designed to do acts of kindness. What kind of kindness do they do? So there's different kinds. Some people, most of them are free loan societies. A gemach gives you loans for free. Sometimes they give you a gift, they give it out for free. What kind of things? Some of them are money. Some of them are objects which are very commonly needed. So for example, there's a gemach for, usually when you have a brit milah for a baby, there's a special pillow that you use that has sort of decorations on it. So there's one family, they decided, we're going to make a gemach for pillows. And whoever has a brit and they want to get a special pillow, they call up this family, they publicize their phone number. They says, yeah, we'll give you the pillow. You can bring it back. You only need it once. You only need it once in a while. So it's a gemach for pillows for brit. Another family has, there's a custom. Before you have a brit, the Shabbat beforehand, there's a custom called Shalom Zachar, where there's a little party on Friday night, and the customary food in the Ashkenazi world, anyways, is to eat chickpeas. You eat chickpeas. You boil up chickpeas, and you make a tasty dish. Arbis, very good. That's right. That's what they call it in Yiddish. Very good. So there's a gemach arbis. This family decided we're going to give away free chickpeas for whoever has this kind of a festive event. We're going to give this away. And you can find a gemach for everything under the sun. One of the crucial ones, I think Binyamin is referring to, there's even a gemach for medicines. Now, medicines need a prescription. They don't want to do anything illegal. But sometimes people run out the last minute, they can't get to the pharmacy, and hopefully they have a pharmacist who's going to administer the right medicine to the right person. If somebody comes and he says, listen, I ran out temporarily, people donate whatever they have left over. So you take antibiotics for 10 days and you finish, but they gave you a little extra, or you finish after 7 days, you're already better. You're supposed to take the full course, but not everybody does. Sometimes there's some medicines left around. Everybody has in their house nowadays in Western countries extra medicines that they don't need. They're not using them anymore. So if you donate them to a gemach, there's a fellow in my community who's a nurse, and he runs a gemach for medicines. And whoever has, so he has the common medicines for children, whether it's a little bit of, antibiotics, Moxipan, or stuff like that. He has a gemach for medicines, which is an amazing thing. So there's even an organization that not only do they stock them and then give them out for free, sometimes they'll even try to get them to you. Yeah. They'll even transport them. There's an organization called, I forget what it's called now. And they have a network around the world of, if people have to transport medicine, sometimes it has to be in freezer packages, and it has to get there very quickly from one place to the other. So they have a network for transporting medicines. Beautiful things that people do to save lives. Save a life is the most important type of chesed you can do. Okay? Thank you, Benjamin. Okay, so the principle is very clear. Saving a life of right. Shabbat, as the Torah states, I'm on page 235, the beginning of the chapter. Keep my decrees and laws, which a person shall do and live by. The Torah gives us decrees and laws that a person should do and live by. Sages can live by and not die by. Right? The mitzvah of the Torah were given so that people may live by them, not die to fulfill them. Of course, the exceptions we saw in the footnote, but the standard is that we should, if there is a danger to life, not hesitate. Now, how do you know if there's danger? So, there's two ways. One is asking the doctor, and one is asking the sick person himself. If he says, "I'm going to die," we take the patient's determination very seriously. If you look on page 237, we quote a pasuk in Mishlei 14. It says, "The heart knows its own bitterness," meaning that sometimes only the patient can assess his own condition. We're not talking about a hypochondriac, somebody who's always thinking that he's going to die. Some people are very scared. But a normal person, if he says, "This is serious," we follow his intuition, even if the doctor says, "I don't think this is serious." But a regular person, usually people don't know, but you ask a doctor, and you get the doctor. That's why doctors can carry phones, and doctors should, be on call to be able to determine if we need to desecrate the Shabbat or not. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I fully understand the note. I just imagine one case, for example, on Shabbat, a terrorist attacked a Jew and tried to kill the Jew,
yeah.
And then the security guard shot the terrorist,
yeah.
But he was not dying. He was bleeding, painful, but he's no longer able to continue his attack.
Right.
But he's suffering, and he said, "Give me death or save me." Then what you do? You should save his life or give him another shot to kill him.
Wow, that's an interesting question. It's nothing to do with the laws of Shabbat, really, right? It's nothing to do with the laws of Shabbat. It has to do with the laws of murder and saving a life. That's an interesting moral question. So I'm not going to discuss it right now. It's very,
Here it talks about, for example, idolatry, murder.
Murder. Is that considered murder? Right.
Doing murder, so we will let him die, or.
Listen.
It's not dying
very
quickly enough. With time, maybe after 10 hours he will die, but he's in the meantime suffering a lot.
Right.
So painful, shouting, but he's no longer able to do further terrorist attack.
It gets very complicated. I want to stick to the basic principles, and that is to save a life. Save a life. You kill the terrorist. You stop him from doing what he's doing. Number one. And in terms of, usually the next stage is, if he's still alive, he should be punished by the law, and he should be put behind bars for life, or but many times you think the terrorist is down, and he's not really down. He really could secretly pull out another gun or take out a knife and stab you. And so we have to be very careful to make sure that this terrorist, many times they're on drugs, they're wired, they're very hyper, you have adrenaline, and they can be dangerous even. So we have to make sure they're neutralized, number one. That's save a life by killing the terrorist. After that, that's already more difficult questions. If he's 100% neutralized, then there's the rules of engagement. There's the rules of how to treat prisoners and all those kind of things. It's much more complicated. When it comes to the laws, let's get back to the laws of Shabbat right now. I don't want to get sidetracked because I want to finish the laws of Shabbat and get on to the next topic. But the principle is clear that we desecrate the Shabbat. Now, it's surprising perhaps, but we talked about the other day, we talked about that if there's a non-Jew there, maybe you should ask the non-Jew to violate the Shabbat. It's only rabbinically prohibited to ask the non-Jew. Or if you have a minor, we talked about it, somebody is not obligated to keep the mitzvot, somebody who's not bar mitzvah. If they're not violating the Shabbat. It's better let them do it. No, the rabbis say, when it comes to saving a life, not only should you do it first. If you're a rabbi, you should do it. If there's a great rabbi, he should do it. The greatest rabbi that's there, he's the one that should desecrate the Shabbat. To teach everybody that when it comes to saving a life, we don't cut corners. We try to, we must make sure that this takes precedence over everything else. Of course, not every situation is equal. If, when it's an extreme situation, like driving to save somebody who's fallen or somebody who's, could be a life-threatening situation, by all means, timing is of the essence. But if it's not an absolute emergency, somebody needs care, and you have to, so if there's ways to do it which are not going to delay in any way, there's no shadow of a doubt, then if there's no delay whatsoever, so then, of course, we try to minimize Shabbat. We still, Shabbat does exist. So it's a little bit of a tricky business. We're also doing the malacha. So if you're going to drive to the hospital, so each time you put your foot on the brake pedal, the light turns on. And that's another violation of Shabbat. Each time you put your foot on the gas, you're burning more benzene and gas, and you're causing a fire. And so maybe when you're driving, you should try to coast and not push on the pedals as much as possible. We have bad experience with that. You may be trying to save a life and trying to avoid Shabbat violations by driving in a certain way. Turns out you have an accident. The person dies in your car because you didn't get to the hospital because you crashed the car. And it turns out more people are violating the Shabbat because, they call the police. And it get practically is very, very difficult. Where usually we say, if you're going to violate the Shabbat, use a shinui, use your elbow, right, instead of your finger. Do it in the not normal way. That takes it down from the level of a biblical violation. So if it's not going to delay anything and it's going to get done just as well, so you use your elbow, you do it in a not normal way. But driving with your elbows, though, is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe. You have to be very careful not to play with fire. And gloves. Touching the car is not the problem. The problem is, turning on the car, turning off the car, putting in the gas. So if you have to drive to the hospital, you drive to the hospital as fast as possible, safely. And the question is, I've driven to the hospital on Shabbat more than once, yeah, and I violated the Shabbat more than once. Once I was in the army, and I was a tank driver. And tanks have to be ready on Shabbat. There was a situation that was in the Hermon, and it was actually an armored personnel carrier that was stuck in the snow. I was in a snowstorm. We should have some snow. It's already the end of January. We haven't had any snow this year. But rain, we need some rain. It's beautiful weather, but in any case, hopefully the rains will pick up. But I was stuck, and the soldiers needed me to drag them out. I drove a tank, and the tank is much stronger than the armored personnel carrier. So I hooked up their. They had to be ready. They couldn't get out of the snowbank that they were snowed under, and it was Shabbat. I was on my way to shul in the base, in the Shemon base, and there's no one else around. I didn't know what to do. But bottom line is, it was a necessary duty for preparedness for war. That's our job as soldiers. So all the vehicles had to be ready. So yeah, I got into the tank. I pulled them out. Even though it's a far distant thing that we didn't have a war and it's been a long time, but that's part of. So the security is one. Another situation, I violated the Shabbat. Again, it's not called violation if you're doing it to save a. This is an interesting one. The halacha says a birthing woman, of course, it's a dangerous situation. It's a life-threatening situation. It's life-threatening to the baby as well as to the mother. And so, but even after birth, caring for a mother who just gave birth is considered a dangerous situation. Right? What do we have in the Torah? Rachel died in childbirth. Right? We know that it's a very dangerous situation. Not only that, this is fascinating. Sages said that whatever a birthing, we said, Lev yodeh amarat nafsho, the heart, the bitter heart knows its own needs. And so if a birthing mother says, I need something, we violate the Shabbat for her. Whatever she says she needs. So one fascinating example is turning on the lights. Sometimes women get scared, especially after childbirth. They feel there's something called postpartum depression. There's women after birth sometimes need the lights on. They need all sorts of different things. We know that even in pregnancy there's cravings and so forth, which the halacha takes very seriously. I don't say you don't violate the law for a pregnant woman who has a craving, but for a birthing woman, she's considered to be in a dangerous situation for 3 days. For 3 days after birth. So we were in the hospital, and my wife gave birth to my first child, Baruch Hashem, Tiferet. She's now 28 years old, I think. Baruch Hashem. 28 years ago, my wife gave birth on Friday night, and it was Shabbat afternoon, and it was getting dark in the room. There was nobody around, and she started to get scared, anxious. And she wanted the lights on. The lights were off because it was a sunny day. There was sun all day long, but now it was getting evening. And she wanted the lights on. So I look around and see that there's no, if there was an Arab nurse, I could take a few minutes, 1 minute here, 1 minute there. It wasn't a life-threatening situation in that way. There was an emergency. But there's nobody around. There's nobody there. And she was getting anxious. So I used my elbow and I turned on the lights for the sake of the birthing woman. And that's an open Gemara that you have to do. So that's another situation. And of course, another situation is my son broke a leg or something. Had to drive him to the hospital. We're going to see what exactly is considered to be a life-threatening situation. There's a list of ailments, and if a bone breaks and it's not set properly, there are situations where a broken bone is considered to be life-threatening. So I drove him to the nearest medical center. It's called Terem in Israel. It's not quite a hospital, but emergency care center called Terem. And the question is, so for sure I could drive there, but once I get there, and I drove normally, as maybe in the back of my mind I was trying not to start and stop more than I had to, but I drove there, and then I get there, and I park the car. Now the question is, can I turn off the car? Why should I turn off the car? I drove there. I needed to save my son, whatever. He got an x-ray. He got a cast, whatever it is. He got taken care of. So there's two questions. Number one is, when I get there, can I turn off the car? Turning off the car is extinguishing a fire. That's one of the 39 categories of work. So we learned that it's actually not for a productive purpose. So maybe it's only rabbinically prohibited, but there's also electric stuff. So can you turn off the car? Then the question is, after I finished getting him the treatment, can I drive back? This was Friday night. I've got another 20 hours of Shabbat. I'm stuck there when, I don't know, I'm in a hospital or in a medical care center. So what do? Make a long story short, or shorter. So regarding turning off the car, there's different opinions. Some people say leave the car running. Leave the car running. Put it in park, and just, you don't turn it off. And you'll run out of gas. Okay, Motzei Shabbat, you'll buy new gas. I don't know, you call somebody to help you. And but other people say, well, you should indirectly, if you have a car which is manual, it's not automatic, it's very easy, just sort of get it to stall, right? If you too quickly lift up on the clutch, right, the car automatically turns off. So then the car's off, but so you're doing it sort of indirectly. But other rabbis say the following, and this makes a lot of sense, that if the car is on, and you're going to go in and take care, you're going to go into the hospital and take care of business, some kid could drive by. I don't know if you've ever done this, but you know the concept of a joyride? Somebody could jump into the car without a license. He doesn't, he says, "Oh, car, I'll take it for a spin. I'll go out and I'll have fun," and then he could crash and kill himself. And maybe a kid who's not responsible, a 10-year-old could jump in. You could drive a car, think he can drive a car, and say, and so it's a dangerous situation to leave a running car open.
The waste gas in a relatively closed environment could be dangerous also.
If you're in a parking garage, leaving the gas on, if it's a small parking garage, yeah, that could be dangerous too. Carbon monoxide poison.
Some people committed suicide in that way.
Right. That's a very small. Usually we're talking about public places, but anyways, so some rabbis say it's only rabbinic to turn it off if you do it with a shinui, and it could be a dangerous situation. There's posting. So yeah, that's what I did. I turned off the car. It's considered to be a dangerous situation, but then we got the medical care, and I don't think you're allowed to drive back. So I put my gears in motion, and I remembered that we have a family friend who lives not so far away. Well, it's not so far away, about a half an hour walk. So I took my son, I can't remember how old he was, but he had a broken leg, so I put him on my back. So I'm carrying him with his broken leg in the cast for about a half an hour walk. It's about 10 at night. I knock on the door. I find the place where we have this family friend. It's not a close friend or anything. I knock on the door, and they answer. They're surprised to see me. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. They quickly understand. It turns out, actually, that fellow is a doctor himself, so he understood what was going on, and they hosted me for the rest of the Shabbat. I spent Shabbat at their house, and it's an amazing story. I cry every time I tell the story. I hope you forgive me, but I'm an emotional guy. What's the story? They had guests for Shabbat. Who are the guests? Turned out to be a distant cousin of mine. How they're a distant cousin of mine? We share the same grandmother. Great-grandmother, excuse me. Our great-grandmother is the same. So it's a distant relative. And they're there for Shabbat because they're friends with this family friend of ours. And we spend Shabbat, and they give me a bed to sleep in, and we eat the meals with them. And the kids, my son, I forget how old he was, and their daughter happened to be the same age. So they played all Shabbat. They're playing. I realized, think about it for a second. How exactly are we related? We realize that it's this same great-grandmother we both have. And there's only one thing I know about this great-grandmother. One story I have of her. I never met her. She died before I was born. What do I know the story about her? That when she came over from Europe to Canada, my family lived in Canada, and my grandfather came first, got a job, and he sent to have his parents brought over, and they came over. And at the time, we're talking about, I think, in the 20s, 30s of the 20th century. So the mother was, it came by boat and went on a train. In Canada, there's the CN rails, trains that go across Canada. It's maybe 10,000 kilometers. And you get on the train near the coast. I don't know exactly where it is, Halifax or something. And the train goes all the way across Canada. And so they're on the train for weeks at a time to go all the way across Canada. Anyway, she gets on the train and they tell her, okay, now it's your stop. It's time to get off. You're in Toronto. That's where we lived, in Toronto. Maybe she was on the train for a week and a half. I don't know how long. She says, I can't get off this train now. Shabbat.
Well,
Turned out they reached Toronto exactly on Shabbat. And she was a very religious woman. And she didn't want to get off the train. She said, listen, you don't know this language. You don't know the country. This is where your son lives. You have to get off the train here. She didn't know what to do. So she made the determination that this was essentially pikuach nefesh. But whatever it is, she got off the train. She got off the train, and but she felt so bad about it that in her mind she violated the Shabbat. That for the rest of her life, I don't know if it was 10 years, 20 years, however it is, every Monday and Thursday she fasted out of tshuva for disrespecting the Shabbat and getting off the train. And of course, you get off the train, there's packages, and you carry them, whatever it is. There was no eruv at the time, whatever it is. So she felt that there was a violation of Shabbat that was unfortunate. It wasn't her planning, wasn't her decision. It was, she basically had to. But to do tshuva, she fasted for the rest of her life, every Monday and Thursday. So it was amazing. My son, and so they're like fourth cousins, right? They're both descended for them, it's their great-great-grandmother. And they're playing together the Shabbat. Why are they playing this together Shabbat? Because I didn't want to violate the Shabbat and drive my car back home. So because we were keeping the Shabbat, her great-great-grandchildren met each other and played with each other on Shabbat. It's an amazing tradition of keeping the Shabbat. So, yeah. So of course you have to violate the Shabbat, but you also have to keep it. Shabbat doesn't disappear because you hop in your car because you have to take somebody to the hospital. Sometimes you can if there's an ambulance that's coming back to the place where you live and they're driving anyways, ambulance has to drive there and back because they have to maybe take somebody else to the hospital. An ambulance driver can drive back because he has to be on call where he lives. So and there's a system sometimes. Nurses and doctors have shift work where they work. They get off their shift at 10 a.m. on Shabbat, so they have to stay there. They can't come home. To get there, they're going to save a life. But what about going home? So the system has been built that you use non-Jews. There's a lot of non-Jewish taxi drivers, and the hospital has a service that whoever finishes their shift in the middle of Shabbat, they get taken home by a non-Jewish driver. So if you have a non-Jewish driver, and the idea is also this concept that Chalel alav Shabbat achat, yishmor Shabbatot harbeh. If we don't allow someone to come back, even with a non-Jewish driver, to come back to their home after they finish their shift on Shabbat, very few people are going to want to become nurses or doctors. Because even if they have one shift, which is partially on Shabbat, it means that they don't spend Shabbat at home. They don't get to come home to rest. So there's a concept that we have to set up a system so that they'll still remain motivated to keep Shabbat the next time. Next time, if we don't provide a permitted way for them to go back, then they may just say, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. And they'll just drive their car themselves, and you'll have a Jew violating the Shabbat unnecessarily. So there's the concept, if you're a doctor or a nurse, it's different. But so sometimes if there's an ambulance, you could hitch a ride. It's a complicated question. But when you also when you travel to the hospital, my son and his wife Bezrat Hashem are expecting a baby within about a month from now, a month and a half. And when you drive to the hospital on Shabbat, when you're having a baby, of course you should go to the hospital. Many times it's a question of life or death. But what can you bring with you? Because you're driving outside of the tchum, the boundary, right? You're leaving the boundary and you're carrying things. Are you allowed to carry things? There's no eruv. Or you drive on the highway. If you go out, if you're outside of the city, if you're inside the city, you're well within the eruv. But if you're outside, it's a problem. So you take as some people, it's ideal to empty the car of all the unnecessary. Sometimes you have a map. Sometimes you have some tissues. You take them out of the car before Shabbat, just so that you're ready. That on Shabbat, when you drive, you take only the essentials. Yeah.
If you have to violate on Shabbat something, like what you tell a story about the light in the room with your wife.
Yes.
Before you turn off the light, you say a bracha, or if you have something in mind from if you violate now, but I have to do this. Or
It's a good question. It's a good question. I don't think there's a bracha. No. If anything, you would say, I'm about to do something to save a life. I'm doing the mitzvah of saving a life. But I don't know of any bracha that there is. Yeah. Yeah. There's a bracha, there's a prayer soldiers say when they go out to battle, right? So not every situation are you going out to battle. You have this awareness that I'm going out to save the Jewish people. But it makes sense that before you're going out on an operation, sometimes on Shabbat, the soldiers are busy every night. Even though there's no active war, there's a subtle war going on with the terrorists all over Judea and Samaria that are plotting to attack us. And the soldiers are busy every night going and making arrests and finding guns and weapons they shouldn't be there. And so even on Friday night, they go out and they do their operations, let alone guard duty and patrols, which are common in every yeshuv. But so there's maybe a prayer that you go when you go out to battle, but in terms of violating the Shabbat, no. Okay, yeah, another question, yeah.
How about the electrical wheelchair? Is it allowed on Shabbat?
That is an interesting question. That is a very interesting question. They're more and more common. You see them around. A lot of people, old people, are coming with a what's that called? Some kind of scooter, some kind of a little chair that you sit on. It's a motorized wheelchair, essentially. So technically, it should be forbidden. You're using electricity on Shabbat. There is some special devices which we mentioned briefly, which are called grama. Grama is indirect action. So some companies, some halachic companies have created devices where you're not actually closing the circuit on Shabbat, for example. You can have a machine which is on all Shabbat, and then all you do is increase the current or decrease the current, which according to almost everybody is not really a Torah violation. And they say for the sake of somebody who would otherwise be totally on their own. If somebody, some people who are used to going to Shabbat and to services on Shabbat, to Beit Knesset, they live alone. And they can't, they're not mobile, they can't walk. So for them to get out of the house and go to shul is a mitzvah. It might even be dangerous for them to be on their own because they could get anxious or depressed. During Corona, one of the biggest problems was that people got sick from being alone. People were trying to stay safe from Corona, but then even to the extreme that people committed suicide because they can't handle being alone. Loneliness is a big issue. So some rabbis have permitted special devices to be attached to these type of scooters or wheelchairs, mechanized wheelchairs, which have a special switch, in which they work in a special way, and of course there's different kinds. They work in a special way so that whatever violation of Shabbat there is, it's only indirect or it's rabbinic, and they avoid the most serious breaches of Shabbat. With of course they're electric and they're not. There's no gas, there's no burning. It's not like a car engine or anything like that. So there's some rabbis which permit it, and you'll see some places people driving to shul on Shabbat. Usually it's elderly or people that are disabled, and usually it has the same big letters on the back. It says this is a special grama vehicle. It's been created specially by this Institute for Halacha and Medicine, Halacha and Science, and they created a special switch called the grama switch, which is used only for great need. But sometimes I see little kids hitching a ride. I don't know. I don't think that's what it was designed for. But it's a machloket. Many poskim allow it. But for in cases of need, a specific question you have to ask your rabbi, of course. We mentioned police. We mentioned dangerous situations. And carrying phones, we talked about leaving on the phone. If it's a dangerous situation, you could carry your phone around. If you're on call, of course, if you're a medical professional. Or if you live in a place where you need to get the alerts. The alerts can save your life. We spoke about that already. Okay, so that's chapter 27 in broad brushstrokes. Chapter 28 is more practical, hopefully. Hopefully you don't live with life-threatening situations so commonly. What happens when you're sick and it's not life-threatening? That's chapter 28.
One more question.
Yeah.
Like they had to go like.
Well, we're going to see there's different types of illness, right? What is the question? Still.
Okay, let's say this old person is going to die. He wants to see his son. And it's on Shabbat. He's going to see his son. He say, I'm going to die. Doctor say he's going to die. He needs to see his son.
Good
his
question.
Son can violate the Shabbat.
It's a good question. It's a good question. It's a fascinating thing. Halakha takes very seriously the last stages of life. We think life is so precious. Even one more moment of life is precious, and it's a well-known phenomenon that people can live longer if their loved ones are with them, or if their loved ones come to see them, and it could actually give them encouragement, and they could live longer. And so, in some situations, you're allowed to violate the Shabbat to go be with a person who's on his deathbed, because that could extend his life. And even if you're not a medical professional, you're a son or you're somebody who's dear to them, there are instances where you're allowed to go and to take care of them. Of course, in the hospital, sometimes the doctors take better care if there's a family member there. Being with them is significant, and yes, there's room for that too. That's considered to be a dangerous situation. But of course, these are serious issues of violating the Shabbat. Sometimes you should ask the rabbi, but if you think that this is pikuach nefesh, don't even ask. If you think this is even a chance that could save a life, don't even ask. You go ahead and do it first, ask questions later. Shoot first, ask questions later. In Judaism, it's the opposite. Save a life first and ask questions later. Okay, chapter 28 is when it's for sure not life-threatening. You're absolutely certain that nobody's going to die. Here, it's fascinating. The rabbis said that there are two categories: a regular sick person and a mildly sick person. Okay, the first category, as you see on page 265, the three categories of sick people: a gravely ill person, one whose life is in danger, that we dealt with in chapter 27. That we talked about all the laws when somebody's in a life-threatening situation. When you're absolutely sure that there's no danger to life, so then we have two types of sick: a regular sick person, whose whole body is ill but whose life is not in danger, and a mildly sick person, one who is ailing in part of his body or experiences pain from bodily ailment. So, as you can see here on page 265, who can read it for us? Stephen, go ahead.
From the first one, the principle of the halakha of
Yeah, go
sick
ahead.
people.
Start from the beginning of chapter 28.
There are three categories of sick people according to halakha. A gravely ill person, one whose life is in danger. A regular sick person, one whose whole body is ill, whose life is not in danger. A mildly sick person, one who is ailing in part of his body or who experiences pain from a bodily ailment. When caring for a dangerously sick person, one does everything on Shabbat that he would do during the week. All Shabbat prohibitions are overridden in order to save a life, as we saw in the previous chapter. When caring for a regular sick person, one who is sick enough that he is forced to lie down, but whose life is not in danger, one may disregard rabbinic prohibition. But Torah prohibition remain in force, as will be explained in the next section. A mildly sick person, or one who is bothered by ailment, that is, one who can walk around as though healthy, but experiences discomfort from a mild ailment, is subject to all rabbinic law, and one may not even violate Shavut di Shavut.
Double rabbinic. Right.
On his behalf. However, if he is in pain, one may do certain things for him even though they are categorized as Shavut di Shavut. Specifically, one may ask a non-Jew to transgress a rabbinic prohibition for him, or Jews may make use of the sinui to do so.
Right, that's a change in the regular way things are done. So let me make it clear, okay? So once we've finished with, there's no danger to life now. You're sick. Two types of sick. Really sick and mildly sick. Really sick means you have to lie down. You can't function. Okay? So if you're mildly sick, you're allowed to do rabbinic prohibitions. If you have so sick that you have to lie down. If you're only mildly sick, the only thing you're allowed to do really is ask a non-Jew to help you, or to do a rabbinic prohibition, or to use a shinui. But usually, now what is interesting here is that for someone who is only mildly sick, he's not allowed to do rabbinic prohibitions, or biblical, of course. What is the very interesting, a relevant rabbinic prohibition? The rabbis made a prohibition on using medicine on Shabbat. Because medicines, it still exists in some places today. I mean, Pinchas can tell us all about it. Pinchas, his wife, has a Chinese medicine practice. And but what's medicine? You take some herbs and you grind them up and you make some kind of a potion. So nowadays they do that in the pharmaceutical companies, and you buy the little pills. They come, it's already done for you. But the concept of making medicine usually involved grinding. It's one of the 39 categories at work. So Rabbi said, you're not allowed to take medicine on Shabbat because you might grind them up on Shabbat, which is a biblical prohibition. So there's a rabbinical prohibition on using medicine on Shabbat. That applies if you're only mildly ill. You can't violate the rabbinic prohibitions. If you're only mildly ill, you can't even take medicine. Only if you're regular, sick that you have to lie down, you can't function, so then you're allowed to take medicine. Okay? So let's keep reading, Stephen. There is a specific
rabbinic enactment forbidding a mildly sick person to take medicine. The poskim disagree whether this prohibition pertains to today medication, which are factory made. The law pertaining to one bothered by a mild ailment will be explained in section 3.
Okay, so we're going to see those. So basically, we're going to see the idea is, of course, he explains this idea of rabbinic enactments. Let's read it. It's a beautiful thing. Michael Arya, maybe you'll read for us the next paragraph. The main idea of Shabbat.
The main idea of Shabbat is that on this day we calmly and tranquilly accept reality as it is. If we have no clean clothes, we wear dirty ones. If we forgot to cook a certain dish, we content ourselves with the food we have. Or we ask a neighbor for help. If we forgot to turn on the heat, we put on a coat. If we forgot to turn on the air conditioning, we suffer a bit from the heat. Even though Shabbat laws sometimes cause suffering, they liberate us from the burden and tension of having to pay constant attention and assure that every little detail for our lives is properly addressed. Therefore, Shabbat is a valuable gift. The feeling of faith, tranquility, and rest that results from accepting reality on Shabbat is enjoyable and uplifting. The sages continue this trend through their enactments, one of which is to refrain from using medicine on Shabbat. If we experience some discomfort, even if it is irritating and unpleasant, we bear it calmly, as this too is part of Shabbat rest. However, if the discomfort causes pain and negates onyx Shabbat, the sages permitted transgressing minor rabbinic prohibitions, shvut, to relieve the suffering. And when it comes to caring for one who is actually sick, the sages allows us to transgress all rabbinic prohibitions, as taking care of one's health is a mitzvah.
Okay, so if you're really sick, then you take medicine. But a mildly sick person, we try to avoid it. So the question is, what about taking Acamol? You have a headache. That's the most common question, right? You have Tylenol in America, or whatever, ibuprofen, whatever it is, whatever. Migraine's a more serious headache. It's just a regular headache. Migraine, many people who have migraines, they have to lie down and they can't function. So once you're lying down, you can't function, so then you're considered sick. You're allowed to take medicine, right? Prohibition, I'm talking about when you're not a migraine, it's just a regular headache. Headache, you don't feel well, you have a sore throat or something like that. There, the rabbi said, we just accept it. We don't do anything on Shabbat about it. Question is, is taking Acamol today considered medicine? Because you're not allowed to take medicine. Some people say, you should take aspirin every day. It's good for your heart. Some people have heart. Some people take Acamol every day. There's different people. Some people have all sorts of ailments, and they say, who grinds medicines themselves today? Yeah. That's very rare. So some rabbis have been more permissible, saying about modern medications. They're only made in the factories. We don't have to worry about that. But he says on the top of page 272, in practice, as long as the ailment is merely irritating but not painful, it is proper to be stringent and avoid taking mass-produced medications. However, if the ailment causes pain, one may take medication, because some maintain that the sages never prohibited taking medication when pain is involved. It's a machloket, but you can be lenient in order to have oneg Shabbat. That's what he says. One thing to be sure about is that if you take taking antibiotics, it's a series, it's a course you have to take regularly over the course of, and in the middle of that course of medicine comes Shabbat. You must continue taking that medicine, because then you won't be able to ever get better if you don't take it for one day. So anything which is a series, the doses, if it started before Shabbat, we rely on this opinion because it's mass produced. Usually these pills are not something it's allowed. It's allowed. Yeah.
Okay, just like those they're diabetic, they rely on insulin.
It's interesting. Of course, diabetic, if they don't take their insulin, they're going to die. Very dangerous condition.
Maybe they won't die, but just that their sugar level spike up.
That could cause death. It's very dangerous. If somebody doesn't take care of their sugar level, it's extremely dangerous. And diabetics, many of them injection, drawing blood to test themselves. They have to take care of themselves on Shabbat. 100%, no question about it. That's the case. That's category number 1. That's chapter 27. That's danger to life. Even on Yom Kippur, sure, of course. Yeah, right. Eating. That's right. Keeping the sugar level. Absolutely. So that's not what we're talking about now. What about cuts and wounds? So I mentioned to you before that you can put a Band-Aid on, right? Sorry?
Can you put a Band-Aid on?
Yes, as on page 276 it says explicitly, when we use a Band-Aid to protect the wound from friction caused by clothing, other objects, and it's not considered to be tofer because it's on the body, and it's best to avoid, like I said before, putting one end of the Band-Aid on the other end, because then you are perhaps, it's like sewing. It's like you're using glue to stick the two items to each other, and it's best to put it on your body, not on each other. But if necessary, you can do that. It's considered temporary. It's something that comes off very quickly, and so there's some more details here, but the bottom line is that if you're not violating any rabbinic law, then it's allowed if you're sick enough, right? We said not just mild sick, but regular sick, and but you have to try to avoid biblical law. Spreading creams, oil, creams is like thick. We said it's a problem. Memareach, smoothing the skin and smoothing it out. It's like it comes from the law of tanning, one of the 39 categories of work. So we don't put on creams, but liquids are allowed. So putting on oil, if you have a wound which needs to be cleaned, that's okay if it's liquid, but not an ointment. We talked about one of the chapters we sort of skipped because not too many people have young children here, but taking care of a baby, many times you need to put on cream, a rash, to avoid a rash. So we have to be careful. We don't spread the cream directly onto the baby. We put a glob of cream onto the diaper or something, and then when the diaper is on the baby, it'll get mushed around. Or you use a stick, not your fingers, because you don't want to be smoothing the cream directly, because it's a problem of memoreach.
Always spread the cream on the diaper.
Or just place it on the diaper. Don't spread it. Place it. You use a spoon or use a stick, like a popsicle stick or something, and you scoop out the cream, and you place it down onto the diaper in the place where it's going to get to the baby's body. You can also place it on the body. Just put it there, not rub it in, not without rubbing it in. The rubbing it in will happen when they move, when you hold the baby, but not directly smoothing it with your hands. That's we try to do it indirectly. Of course, the baby is considered to be sick. So we're saying small children, babies, they're always considered to be sick, the regular sick, not deathly ill, obviously. So for them, you can violate rabbinic prohibitions, for example, medicine. But memareach might be biblical prohibitions. You have to be careful. Smoothing, right? So taking care of babies is a whole other chapter that we didn't discuss so much. Other questions about taking care of people that are sick. Professional massages is considered to be medicine. We don't do medicine unless so we don't give if it's professional massage, it's not allowed. But just to give your friend a massage while he's sitting there could be considered part of Oneg Shabbat. And also exercise. If you're just stretching to loosen up your muscles, it's allowed. But to do actual proper exercise that you're sweating is a problem on Shabbat. Lots of examples here. We can't go through all of them. But the basic principles we covered. And questions? There's a lot. Of course, stop the bleeding. You put a bandage on, and you can put on iodine, right? The stuff so to prevent infection. There's a lot, but there's so many examples. We can't go into all of them. The basic categories, I think we've made very clear, and we talked about the basic uses of medicine for that. So we'll stop with that, okay? So, now that we finished dealing with the two chapters about medical care, saving lives and taking care of sick people, the last two chapters we've already done.
Yes, we finished.
So I think that the one chapter we didn't do is chapter 25, but we did speak about it many times, that using a non-Jew is rabbinically prohibited, but if for the sake of somebody who's sick, it's allowed. We talked about the concept of a Shabbat goy, right? Becoming a Shabbos goy, or using a non-Jew to carry for you if there's no eruv. So we pretty much, we've covered our brief survey of the laws of Shabbat, and of course it's 600 pages of serious study. We should be finding the time to go ahead, or using this sweet children's book gives maybe a nice stage for some of you who want to, especially if you have children, to learn it with your children. We've completed our study, our brief, a couple of weeks survey of the laws of Shabbat. When you do have questions, ask a rabbi, unless it's something to do with loss of life. Don't ask, right? But everything else, you should have, you can consult the book, of course. The book can be your rabbi, especially on Shabbat. You don't have a phone or a WhatsApp to use, so consult the books. Many times this Shabbat included. Something came up, and I wanted to look up the law. My wife had a new pair of socks, which was closed with one of these plastic, there's a tag on it with a plastic string that ties the two socks together. Question is, can you pull them apart on Shabbat? So, right, it's like tearing, right? Tearing is the opposite of sewing. So not only that, the bigger problem is called makeh patish, the final hammer blow, right? That final act that you do, which makes the object usable, which was not usable before, could be to melacha, the right. So the bottom line is, I told her not to use those new socks on Shabbat. There is room to be lenient, but I looked it up. I have many books in my house, Baruch Hashem, many halacha books. And I saw the discussion how some rabbis say it's allowed, some people say it's not allowed because of the various issues involved. And there was room to be lenient, but she had many other pairs of socks. She didn't have to use those socks. Once, I'll tell you a final story. For today, I was away for Shabbat in a small town where I was trying out to be the rabbi.
Try out to be the
Rabbi.
You wanted
To be the rabbi, yes. Tryouts, exactly. Right. So it was like a test. Yeah, I was there. I gave lessons. I met the people, met the community, and they could see me. I could see them. Well, it was very nice Shabbat, and I gave the shiurim, and wouldn't you know it, my clothes got dirty halfway through the Shabbat. So I had brought an extra pair of clothing. But I start to change the clothing, and I see that there's a tag. Maybe it was from the dry cleaners or something, and they staple it on or something. I didn't know what to do because it looks embarrassing to be going with clothes with a tag on them. I debated in my mind. Okay, makeh patish. Maybe it's finished the final hammer blow. Maybe it's ripping, tearing. I didn't know what to do. I was lenient. I was lenient because of all the discussion that I was familiar with, Baruch Hashem. And the extent of the violation was, of course, it wasn't anywhere near a biblical prohibition. And I could wear the clothing anyways. It wasn't the final hammer blow. You could wear it, even though I was a little embarrassed. Still, it was wearable. And so I was lenient, and Baruch Hashem, things went well, and I got the job. I became the rabbi eventually. Baruch Hashem. So you have to know halacha. Who was I going to consult? I was the rabbi. So if you're a rabbi, you better know your halacha even more. But by all means, it's good to have who to consult with and to have a book. Have a book. Whether you have a book with pictures in it, or this book, or a different book, of course you're going to find differences of opinion. That should be no surprise. But it's always very important laws to study. If you have extra time to study, I suggest you study the laws of Shabbat. The next topic we're going to study is the laws of Kashrut, B'ezrat Hashem. Approaching Shabbat, reason why we're going to be discussing Kashrut, included in Kashrut, is the laws of agricultural laws. That's what we're going to be starting with, not necessarily the laws of meat and milk, which everybody, perhaps are they're the meat, if you will, of the laws of Kashrut. But we're going to start with the laws that have to do with Eretz Yisrael. Because what happens in Shvat?
The New Year of the Trees.
That's right, the 15th of Shvat. Right, so we talk a lot about the land of Israel and the fruits of the land of Israel. We appreciate Hashem for the fruits. So part of that is going to be, how do you make fruits in the land of Israel kosher? The kosher laws when it comes to the land of Israel, the tithes that you have to take off, that's what we're going to start it with, B'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow morning. And unfortunately, the laws of Kashrut in Pnimei Halacha has not been translated yet. So there is a book in Hebrew, which I'll be using. But there are other books in English. We don't have one book that everybody can read from. But since we're not actually reading every word here, I'm basically giving you a survey, a summary of the most important things you have to remember for keeping kosher and for practical living. It's not the end of the world that we don't actually have a book that we're going to be reading from, but we'll be using basically the laws of Kashrut. It's also 2 volumes, just like there's 2 volumes of the laws of Shabbat. It took us about a month. I hope the next month get through the laws of Kashrut, the 2 volumes. It's not 600 pages, only 400 pages, I think. But we should get through most of them, B'ezrat Hashem, soon.
We start with Purim at the beginning of Adar, we start?
Even before. We hopefully start talking about Purim. Probably the beginning of Adar. So we have a month. We have the month of Shvat to talk about Kashrut, and maybe we'll talk about brachot as well a little bit, because you have to make a bracha before you eat the fruit.
Is it helpful to study the Mishnah Zeraim?
Very helpful, sure, of course. It's also a mitzvah on its own to study, but even it's not. You don't learn practical halacha from the Mishnah, but it's the basis for everything that comes afterwards. No question about it. Okay, we'll stop here.